Hello, everyone, and welcome to this breakout session from the TNS Horizons Conference on key payment trends. My name is Shaun Donaghey. I'm the Senior Vice President for TNS's payment market in North America. And it's my pleasure to be joined here today by two knowledgeable experts in payments. We have Nitin Bhas from Kaleido and Peter Pappaioannou. I think I got that right, Peter, I hope, from Global Payments. So thank you both for joining and really looking forward to the discussion. So before I hand over to Peter and Nitin to introduce themselves, we do have some time at the end of the session for some Q&A. So please don't be shy, pop some questions into the live Q&A chat. And if we have time, we can cover those off at the end of the session in about 30 minutes. So, I'll hand over to you first, Peter, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then to Nitin.
Sure, thank you, and nice to be here, at least virtually. Global payments really focus on two areas, really emerging payment trends, and secondly on innovation. Prior to Global Payments, I was at Visa for about 7 years in product strategy, product management, and consulting. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Nitin.
Yeah, thank you, Shaun, and hi again, Peter, and hello to all our delegates. So it's indeed a great opportunity and pleasure to be. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm Nitin Bhas. I'm Chief of Strategy and Insights at Kaleido Intelligence. I'm one of the lead analysts here at Kaleido, working on fintech and payments market research. Kaleido, as a company, we offer a comprehensive payments-related market research, data, market sizing, forecast across 30 key payment sectors, covering 80 plus global country and regional markets. So really, our expertise is that we offer, market research and granular market data to the industry in conjunction with our, industry partner network. So really excited to be here to present some of our thoughts, our research, our findings, and thank you, Shaun. Thank you for this opportunity.
Great. Welcome to both of you, and thanks again for your time. So why don't we kick off the discussion maybe at a macro level relative to general payment trends. Peter, from a global payments perspective, what are you seeing from a trend perspective? And maybe, what are you recognizing from some of the key merchants and customers that you have in some of the verticals that you deploy your solutions?
Sure. Let me maybe just start off with a few themes, and there's a lot of themes out there. If you're reading blogs on a daily or weekly basis, there's a lot of things going on. But in terms of some of the themes that we see, one is just this notion of unified commerce or unified payments. I think that's across the board. I would say just the continued expansion of digital wallets as well as alternative or local payment types. And third, I would say buy now, pay later. And this is still a hot area. And I still believe this is really at the early stages of its evolution. Even though if you think of it, it's a really old model. And those that are familiar with markets such as Brazil, you have parcelado there, or installment payments. This is a technology that's really old, but we're kind of reinventing it to get to the new market, right? And I think in terms of what we're seeing, many of these trends start at the kind of the retail and restaurant area, and then kind of will continue to sprinkle across other merchant verticals. But those are kind of the three top themes from my perspective.
Great, thanks, Peter. Nitin, what can you sort of layer on top of that from a research perspective? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I do agree with Peter. What we've seen over the last 12 to 24 months, it's been unprecedented. How the pandemic has had a significant impact on not just the consumer payment behavior, but also how retailers and merchants deliver their products and services to customers. We've seen the use of cash declining for some time, We've seen how this has been accelerated by COVID. Contactless and proximity payments been around for some time. We've seen some of the consumers previously hesitant and cautious about using such contactless or be mobile payments in the past, now becoming more interested in adopting this mode of payment. So what we're seeing is there is a substantial increase in low value contactless purchases, be in-store payments. Back in 2020, I think we saw a 100 plus year-on-year growth, contributing to contactless mobile and card payment transactions. And as Peter touched upon, we've also seen buy now, pay later being a major trend, and it's growing so fast that we're predicting by 2026, both in-store and e-commerce buy now pay later transactions to exceed 800 billion plus in by 2025 2026, which combined it's like 1.6 trillion in transaction value, which is huge. So it was previously popular in just some regions, but now it's becoming a mechanism to supply goods using these installment payments, and this is primarily being driven by a credit hungry millennial and Gen Z shoppers. So two major trends that we've seen over the last 12 to 24 months.
Do you think, maybe Peter, you can comment on this, that if we took a snapshot of March 2020, pre-pandemic, and looked at, that payments ecosystem and trends, do you see that we are going to revert back to how that effectively was in March 2020? Or do you think we now have 2 years worth of behavioral change that is now going to drive the continued acceleration of some of these new trends, which you and Nitin have pointed out?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the obvious answer is, it was kind of like a tipping point, right? So, I think when you think of like what COVID did, it really accelerated people's investment in the area. And I think as a result, I think consumer behavior is changing, and I think it's changing for the good, right? And so I from my perspective, I don't see us reverting back. If anything, I think there's a lot of innovation out there, especially around the, omni-channel kind of space, if you will, that I think there's a lot more to be done around that. And not, again, just talking about retail, I think it can also have a very similar impact on other merchant verticals.
So I think we can't ignore the likes of the hardware manufacturers as part of where these trends are starting to be driven and their impact on those. So if we take Apple Pay and we take Samsung Pay and how they embed or are starting to embed additional payment technology within the phone and the hardware itself, where do you see the evolution moving forward? Maybe Nitin, this one for you. Where do you see the evolution, and how are they part of this ecosystem moving forward? How important are they? I also would like to understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that we keep discussing nowadays and with clients and partners. So undoubtedly, what we've seen over the last 12, 24 months is that digital payments or in-store contactless payments or mobile payments have become a major success. Just like Peter said, it's been accelerated by the pandemic, and we've seen those in-store contactless usage or proximity payments rise from single-digit market penetration to well over 50% in some cases over the last 2 years. So one of the major contributor to this has been the growth in payment instruments, be it the smartphones, be it contactless card penetration, or be it wearables, alongside the advancements made in point of sale infrastructure. Now, when you take contactless or the proximity payments in many markets, this point of sale infrastructure continues to be a major hurdle, right? And if you take South Asia, Africa, contactless terminals still continue to remain a significant minority but compared to markets, some European markets or the Australian market, the contactless terminals represent a significant majority. So now with Apple coming in, working on enabling its smartphones to accept card payments, I think this will further accelerate the market. Plus, I think this will also enable, like you mentioned, Samsung, but also other players to, bring forward similar services, and this puts them in direct competition with some of the other players who offer these so-called MPOS, mobile point of sale devices. So I believe that this will play an important role, and this will enable Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and all those OEM pays to to just go a step further and establish their market share a bit further. So I think it's going to be an important aspect over the next few years.
Peter, any comment on that and relative to global payments and the retail base and where you're seeing some adoption or at least some growth in terms of where that technology is going to sit and lie over the next couple of years? I think we may have lost Peter. Okay. Okay, thanks. Nitin, okay, over to you.
Yeah.
You're in the hot seat now. So from a merchant mix perspective, is there anything that you're seeing, whether it's big box retail or specialty retail or hospitality, is there any particular area in the sort of merchant segments?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the consumers who've changed their behavior over the last 12 to 24 months, right? I mean, what we've seen is merchants and retailers, they want to bring customers back into stores. They have had to revisit their e-commerce strategies because there's been an acceleration of consumer migration from in-store to e-commerce. So there is also that increased demand for merchants to provide accept Apple Pay and other mobile payment or wallet support. So it depends on the country of operation. You were asking which markets will lead them, but all markets are different. But at the end of the day, merchants are expected to offer that omni-channel experience by not just accepting card, but also mobile payments and new payment methods. And the key theme is to offer the consumer with a seamless, convenient, frictionless checkout experience. So I think that there's an ever increasing demand for different types of payment methods, and with merchants and retailers now seeing usage across these different payment methods skyrocketing over the last few years, this will come to the forefront, and this will become a strategy for them. And as I mentioned, will be focused around three key themes: convenience, personalization, and accessibility.
Peter, welcome back.
Thank you. The joys of technology.
Yeah, the joys of live technology. So, talking a little bit further about adoption and advice for merchants. So if you had a merchant come to you and that hasn't upgraded their technology, they haven't made the switch to accepting, payments via mobile wallets or NFC. I mean, what's the advice that you would provide to them in terms of, what they need to think about and how they can move forward?
Sure. I mean, it's a tough question because I think there's a lot out there for the merchants to consider. But I would say first and foremost, I think, have a good understanding of your customer base, and just kind of acknowledge that customers will want to pay with their preferred, payment choice in the future. And in the future, this is going to be table stakes, right? So I think there's a report recently from WorldPay, Global Payments Report, that said, more than half of the e-commerce globally in 2023 is going to be done with a digital wallet. So whether or not they like it or not, it's going to happen. So it's a matter of understanding who their customer base is and what the adoption rate is going to be for their customer base. And then the other 2 points I would say to merchants are, number two is, make sure that you're thinking about the overall user experience, because a lot of these things are just adding on brands, labels to the checkouts, and just be cognizant of what that's kind of doing. And then I would say number three is start to experiment in order to learn, right? So if there's a way you can understand how these technologies, and not only mobile wallets or digital wallets, but also other technologies, start to experiment with your user base, your consumer base, as much as you can, to really start learning some of those lessons.
Okay, I think you just broke up at the end of that, Peter, but I think we got the theme. Nitin, any additional comments to that in terms of where a merchant may look for from an advice and guidance perspective? And then secondly, when we think about mobile wallets, we generally just go to contactless transactions at a point of sale.
Mm.
But there are many more use cases beyond that. So maybe you could just touch on what else you're seeing from a use case perspective and the applicability of those wallets in those other sectors.
Yeah. Shaun, I'll break that into two aspects. I'll break that into the in-store aspect as well as the e-commerce aspect. So consumers, they enjoy the in-store experience, right? And that it gives a sense of a normalcy during in a post-pandemic world. So they would want to come back into stores, regardless of the demographic. And merchants will need to accept and understand that the customer behavior, their shopping habits, that it might have likely changed, and the role of the in-store retail will need to evolve and cater to a digital first approach. And as I mentioned, convenience will be the overriding factor that will drive consumer demand and growth back to the stores, back to the pre-COVID levels. So retailers and merchants, they must understand these requirements and make sure that they offer, be it Apple Pay, be it the mobile wallets, be it the facial recognition technology that's gaining traction in China, cater to all these consumer demands. And it's not just payment methods. I would also like to touch upon how consumers now demand different types of different kinds of delivery models. Order them in store, get them delivered home, order them online, get them delivered in store. So many models being demanded for by customers. And when you move to the e-commerce, a lot of the shopping's being done on a mobile device, right? Peter just mentioned how consumers are using mobile commerce for mobile devices for doing their e-commerce shopping and things like that. So that's also enabling other major trends, be it social commerce or be it subscription services. What the pandemic has reinforced, I believe, is that the need for merchants to offer a truly omni-channel shopping experience. And that's not just on your laptop and your mobile, but also, as I mentioned earlier on, just doing that in store, having that digital experience, doing it on your mobile, doing it on social media, doing it on TikTok, Instagram, I don't know. So it's increasingly playing a role in how consumers shop online. So these are some of, and not to mention subscription services. So there's a lot of other experiences, other trends that's linked to this that we need to take into consideration as merchants. And this is becoming an important channel for, I would say, for the retailers and merchants.
So what we've seen at TNS, we talked about the cash to cashless conversion and the acceleration of that during the pandemic, particularly in unattended payments. There's this very, very strong growth curve in terms of, vending, EV, self-service, kiosks, etc. Basically now going from a cash to a cashless and contactless within that as well, which sort of gives rise to the question, and maybe Peter, you can comment on this one. What about the decline of cash? Where do you see the trend going from a, payment or electronic payment adoption perspective in all of the situations that we've talked about here? And what role will cash have in the next 10, 15 years?
You're trying to drive out cash. That's part of the overall business model, right? You look at the Visas, MasterCard, they're trying to really convert cash, and that's kind of where their valuations are kind of built off of. So, it's interesting because I think the consumer is going to dictate their preferred choice as they pay. But I will say there probably is a place for cash, just as there's place for, what makes it easier to take out a card if I'm traveling and if I have to go to, let's say, a country that I may not be familiar with. Let's say I'm going to Thailand. Like, as a consumer, and if I'm traveling, do I have the confidence that my digital wallet will be accepted there? Do I have confidence that my Visa or MasterCard or American Express will be accepted there? Or will I have to take cash out? So until we kind of get confidence, I think, in that, and I think it's probably more about merchant acceptance of these payment factors as well. But until you kind of have that confidence as a merchant or as a consumer, I think that's when the ultimate tipping point will become. But you could also look at, there are economies such as in the Scandinavian countries that are primarily they're cashless, and that they're cashless today. You don't have to look at 10 years from now, they're cashless today. So there's definitely models out there.
Nitin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I completely agree. What we've seen is cash was declining by, let's say, 4% year on year pre-pandemic, and in 2020 we saw cash usage globally decline by like around 15%, 12% or something. So that's huge. But we conducted some consumer survey, and it was primarily based on Europe. But I'll just to give the delegates a viewpoint on the European respondents or European market. During COVID, a lot of 60% of the respondents tried new payment options, right, during COVID-19. But how it was interesting, we tried to understand how this behavior will change in a post-pandemic world, and it was interesting to note that cash usage was expected to return in a post-COVID world, and they were planning to use more cash in store once COVID-19 becomes no longer a major national concern. So there was also a significant proportion of respondents who confirmed that they will use cash on delivery as well. And as Peter mentioned, there's a number of markets around the world where cash is still the preferred form of payment for low-value transactions. But having said that, and despite what the survey suggests, it is something that we need to accept, and it is our view that as consumers begin to increasingly use wallets and contactless payments for those low-value transactions, plus taking into consideration that we've seen 50 to 200% rise in those contactless limits around the world, we believe this trend will continue in the long term, effectively replacing those low-value cash transactions across most countries around the world.
So when we talk about these emerging payment technologies and emerging payment trends, I mean, we have to really consider security as part of that discussion as well. So, and we also have to consider the role of AI and its play within the payments ecosystem and the industry as a whole, and maybe relative to security. So, Peter, any insight you can provide in terms of security and where technologies like artificial intelligence can intersect and help?
Yeah, and I think that even today, I think when you think of like the role AI plays in fraud, AI is already there, right? Most of the merchants, there's vast companies that are actually built on just providing merchants and issuers that do authorizations for transactions with AI. I mean, I think when it comes to managing your fraud, it's and that's playing a role in fraud today. Now, where I think is kind of interesting in the future, where you think about maybe credit scoring, when you think about targeting from a consumer standpoint, how can you get to your consumer base, better targeting, better messaging, better communication, better cross-selling? I think those are the types of use cases that are still kind of evolving, that I've seen kind of work successfully as well.
Nitin, what does the research tell us from an AI perspective within the industry?
Well, I think what's important is to understand the evolving fraud landscape, right? It's changing all the time, and there's new retail fraud techniques. So AI-based fraud solutions are not just cool, but I think merchants of all sizes will see this improve not just their payment security, but also help them reduce fraud, be it within refund processing or chargeback management, benchmarking, loyalty process. There's all kinds of use cases that's there. And what we're seeing is the biggest retail technology investments are being done in AI, and this is enabling retailers and retail services to optimize their operations and increase their business opportunities, leading to incremental revenue opportunities.
So continuing the theme into the future, seeing where we have a few minutes left, and then we'll see if there's any questions. I guess the big question is what's next. What is next from a payments perspective? What's on the we talked about on the near horizon, but what's the view from yourself, Nitin, in the next 10 years? Where are we going to see the investment and the adoption?
Yeah. I think we've touched upon quite a few trends today, right? And but I think we will see more payment methods evolve. We've seen the emergence of social payments. We've seen the emergence of conversational payments. Buy now, pay later is huge right now. We're seeing facial recognition payments happening in China and some other markets, including the US. That there is an interest for facial recognition payments. So I think we will have a wide range of payment methods available to customers. And as I mentioned earlier on, merchants and retailers should be prepared to offer these to the customers, and we do believe wallet and card-based payments will account for the most, and contactless will account for a lot of the low-value transactions. And if you take buy now, pay later, for example, despite the regulation or despite stricter regulation being planned or being implemented, this will continue to grow. Invisible payments, or rather frictionless payments around not just Amazon Go kind of stores, but also these scan and go or pay on your mobile and mobile checkout or queueless checkouts, no matter what you want to call it. These are all continuing to rise and will become more a norm in many markets. And finally, I would like to come back to the three key themes I mentioned earlier on, that it all comes down to convenience, accessibility, and security for the customers and for merchants. And ensuring a seamless and stress-free checkout experience has been, and I guess is going to be, a critical strategy for retailers over the next 10 years.
Thanks,
Nitin. Peter, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add on. I think we're seeing a lot of evolution regarding, especially with open banking coming. And also paid by bank. So those are kind of two key trends. So it's a matter of how, as a consumer, you are kind of in charge of the data that where your data sits across all these entities, and then also the option to I think you'll see a lot more paid by bank. So how can you draw directly from your bank account versus going through the debit or credit? And I think that's going to be also part of the mix here. But I think in the near term, and I think you see this today in terms of some of the that you will have the option to be available to be checked out, and I think in certain markets of the world, but it's a true NASCAR car approach to the payments. So that's generally coming.
Great, thanks, Peter. So we've got just a few seconds left in the session. So we do have some questions, but I think we can address and circulate those once we actually have and closed out the session. So I want to take the time to say thanks to Peter, and really enjoyed the discussion. I think there's some great points that have come through and some really key trends for us within the industry that we can track to as well. So I really appreciate sparing us the time and also getting your insights on some of these key questions as well. And for those that are on the session, please stick around. I think we have the virtual exhibition, which you can access after the session is closed. So again, thank you, Nitin, and thank you, Peter, and appreciate your time and your input today. And for everyone that joined, thanks for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.